You are listening to the FORSCOM Frontline, bringing you to our soldiers on the front lines of readiness.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the FORSCOM Frontline. I'm Jeannie, and I'm your host. Today, I'm joined by Lieutenant General Matthew McFarlane, who is the Commanding General of the 1st Corps out at Joint Base Lewis McChord. So, welcome, General McFarlane, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, thanks, Jeannie. Excited to talk to you and talk about what we're doing here at JBLM, but most importantly, across the Pacific.
Absolutely. And so this year, kind of this season on the FORSCOM Frontline, we are focusing on warfighting and lethality. And I'm going to be talking to a lot of the senior leaders across FORSCOM throughout the year. So last month, we talked to Command Sergeant Major Holland, who was actually recently out in your theater learning about the Indo-Pacific and all the great things you guys do out there for 1st Corps. And I spent like almost 10 years at 1st Corps, so I know how underrated you guys are out there. And we're kind of like, when you're there, you're just kind of stuck in the Pacific Northwest and nobody really bothers you and you just do what you have to do. So I really want to highlight the great things you guys are doing. And, I'm really excited to talk to you because I miss JBLM. It's been 3 years since I was out there. So you guys hold a special place in my heart. And so I'm excited. And a lot of people don't know that JBLM is the only Army power projection platform west of the Rockies, which is absolutely amazing. That means you guys cover all of the Indo-Pacific. And that is huge. That region is absolutely huge. So let's kind of dive into that. And you guys, like I said, you guys are the center of the Army's Indo-Pacific theater. Can you break down for us kind of like what that means and what you guys do day to day and how you guys are doing in that theater?
Absolutely. Certainly a busy time, and the Pacific is a busy place as you think about the threat there with the PRC. And what we are doing to align our Army and the joint team against that threat that we're watching really closely. We are, on a daily basis, U.S. Army 1st Corps, has training readiness oversight for 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii, 11th Airborne Division, Alaska, and here at JBLM, as you know, the 7th Infantry Division.
Right. And also, the 25th and the 11th are actually part of USERPAC, right?
That's right.
Not
they
necessarily
are, part of USERPAC.
But they're not necessarily a FORSCOM unit, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Which does lead to some interesting challenges, as two of the divisions are U.S. Army Pacific. One is FORSCOM, so we are on two battle rhythms.
Absolutely.
But there's a benefit of that.
Absolutely. And I have some questions about that kind of later on once we dive a little bit deeper in there. So, but I just wanted to clarify that for our audience that may not understand that, we have two commands that are, working together, but still we consider them like, I wouldn't say stepchildren, but, still children of FORSCOM because of what you guys do together. So anyway, I'll let you continue on what you guys do day to day out there in the Indo-Pacific.
So first thing we do is we organize at the operational level. We organize within 1st Corps across the divisions with a Expeditionary Sustainment Command, as well as the Corps' separate enabling brigades that we have here. We organize for generating readiness, so doing exercises. We are doing a large Yakima exercise here next month. 7th Infantry Division is doing what's called bayonet focus as they do a final preparatory exercise before they go to NTC in September and then move on to Korean Rotational Force operational deployment to Korea later in the fall. We also, each location has training areas. In Hawaii they have Shafter, but they also have the Big Island where they do a lot of their larger exercises. In Alaska, they have Fort Wainwright, they have Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, but they also use Donnelly Training Area and the Joint Pacific Joint Alaskan Range Complex, J-Park. So we leverage the training areas we have to build readiness at the foundational level. So we're ready to win the first fight. And then we have training center rotations For 7th ID, I mentioned they go in the National Training Center, but we make sure the 11th Airborne Division, their Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center is in Donnelly Training Area. They are in the middle of the state, which they execute in the middle of the winter, so they can hone their Arctic expertise and build warfighting readiness in the Arctic environment, that extreme environment. And then Hawaii does it in October this past year, in November, this coming fall, they'll do Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center rotation. They're across multiple islands that I already mentioned, with joint partners to exercise in the jungle environment, in the extreme humidity that we have, with the extreme terrain that exists on most of the islands in the first island chain. So we have the opportunity to generate readiness in proximity to where we're located, and then we'll apply that readiness forward. And we work closely with not only core units, U.S. Army Pacific, but the other Army units here at Joint Base Lewis McChord. We have SOF units here. First group is the largest of those SOF units. We have the Multi-Domain Task Force, which First Corps is able to work with routinely, both here at home station, but also in the Pacific, to build our multi-domain operations expertise and frankly experiment in just how we're going to apply these emerging innovative tools at scope and scale forward. And as we apply that readiness, we're building joint interior lines. So on a daily basis, we've got a mix of all four of those things: organizing meetings to make sure we're preparing, organizing, generating readiness in terms of the home station, everything from PT every day, ranges on a base, FTXs, the combat training centers that I mentioned in each of those locations, applying it. Right now, we have 1-2 is forward in Korea, 1st Brigade, 2nd SBCT, part of the 7th Infantry Division, is forward in Korea on a 9-month rotation. We just had folks come back from Cobra Gold, from 7th Infantry Division, and then we've got 25th Infantry Division right now in the Philippines executing Salakanib, which is a large exercise we're doing with them in and around a joint exercise, Balakatan there. So we've got units across that spectrum, organize, generate, applying the readiness, and then building these joint interior lines, which I'll talk more about, I'm sure, as we talk about it here. So lot for our Corps to do as we look at our roles and responsibilities at the operational level, as we're providing the deterrence our country's applying to prevent war with China. And that deterrence is through those exercises that demonstrate our interoperability with our partners, that demonstrate strength, that will maintain the peace there in the Pacific.
Absolutely. And it actually makes all the banners behind you make sense when you talk about the jungle and you talk about the Arctic. You guys are everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. And it was, as you were talking, I was having flashbacks to when I worked at JBLM, and I used to hear all these, exercises that everybody would do. And I know you just kind of mentioned some of the smaller ones, and some of the bigger ones like Yamasakura and Talisman Saber. Like, those are really huge events that happened at JBLM, generally on every other year, I think, for Saber. I can't remember, but like including all of the training events that you just spoke of, and then including these large ones, what are some of the big takeaways? Like, what are we learning from these things other than, training in the jungle environment, training in the Arctic Airborne? Yeah. What are we getting out of this, and how does that prepare not only First Corps, but FORSCOM as a whole, when we're looking at the big picture of defending our nation?
Yeah, well, Yamasakura is every year. Talisman Saber's every other year, every other July. Yeah. We're just about to execute Talisman Saber now, but we every year we're trying to build upon previous years as we look at what we train, or we're calling every one of these exercises is a rehearsal, is how we're approaching it.
Okay.
Making sure we're ready as we're applying certain aspects depending on the force size and package to optimize not only our readiness in the Army with our required tasks or mission essential tasks that we have to have trained, but across the joint team. So these exercises, large exercise, gives us the opportunity to plug in to 7th Fleet, if you will, in Japan,
Yep.
3rd Fleet, any PAC Fleet element there. PAC AF has a bunch of different elements that we plug in with routinely as part of these exercises, which I think is incredibly important because it allows us to ensure, as we're modernizing and innovating, that we're ensuring we're connected to our joint partners there and optimizing what all of us bring to the fight. And in the Pacific, if you aren't joint, it's gonna be a long battle, challenging battle. So to make sure we can dominate, we've got to do it as a joint force there. So that's one key takeaway from these exercises. The second one is with our partners. For Talisman Sabre, the 1st Australian Division is we consider them a downtrace division for First Corps. We exercise with them so often, and they are modernizing right now. Their most significant modernization in recent history, as they're bringing in a bunch of M1 tanks, HIMARS, and some other things that'll help them gain the advantage they want, and certainly help our allies and partners there gain advantage as we're working together. So our interoperability with them, that's technological, as we're working through different things with long-range fires, different ways we can sustain ourselves forward, if you will. And as they field M1 tanks, their capacity to repair M1 tanks will certainly help us if we bring M1 tanks in the theater, for example. And then the protection aspect, as everyone's worried about counter-UAS, the different things that different countries are developing allow us to test that, and allow us, when we're doing these exercises, to test our counter-UAS capabilities, which in the Pacific, with the high winds coming off the water, with the high heat and humidity effect in batteries, making sure we can experiment and get that bottom-up feedback to allow us to win the future fight, as I know is important. Focus across FORSCOM is certainly a focus here if we look at transformation. And then how we provide C2. Right now, working with different units in FORSCOM, and certainly all of our units here at First Corps, to make sure we can connect digitally and voice to drive the responsive fires we need, and to ensure we stay connected and aligned across the joint combined team is incredibly important. So those exercises are a huge opportunity. One last highlight for there, Jeannie, is we combined our warfighter exercise. For those that are familiar with the division warfighters and corps warfighters that happen in CONUS, we were able to do our warfighter forward in Japan this past November, combined with Yamasakura. So it's more efficient use of time, the resources, and to bring in those experts from the Mission Command Training Program to provide us the feedback we need as we are working as a combined team with 1st Australian Division was part of the core for that exercise, as well as our Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force partners, and how we connect with them and optimize each other's capabilities was a great opportunity, which we plan to continue moving forward.
That's amazing. And I'm going to assume that you were in Japan. What did you think about Japan?
Oh, it's great, right? Everyone's super friendly. Everything's very efficient and on time, and they are very diligent about just how they do everything. And so the culture there, I tend to bring my wife over there, and I want to get my kids over there to see and experience it, because it's a really great experience over there. You could leave your phone on the subway and go back an hour later, and it'd still be there on the bench where you left it.
Absolutely. And the food's amazing. I actually just got back last week from 8 days in Japan. Great. So that's why I wanted to know how you felt about it, because Japan was amazing. Like just being able to train with those people who have that kind of efficient mentality. I bet you guys are gaining so much out of that. Like, what's that experience like? What have you guys learned that you can bring back to First Corps and kind of integrate into your everyday operations? Not just, the large integrated events that you guys are doing, but just kind of like day to day. Is there anything that you guys learned from the Japanese that can help?
I mean, from all of our partners, we're learning, and just what you mentioned, the culture over there and understanding the culture of each of our partner nations is one aspect of the benefit of doing these training exercises forward. Understanding the terrain and the environment, the weather, The unique terrain, it varies as you move from north to south, but the one constant is the heat and humidity, the steep hills, the gulches, if you will, the multiple wet gaps you have across all the islands, and the winds and what the effects that has on your organization. And so some of that is that, there was a great article written by one of the battalion commanders in 25th Infantry Division that I'll push to my FORSCOM colleagues here.
I'd love to read
it. Was
it.
just published in Modern Warfare about just the impact of what he discovered with his organization last June in the Philippines. And so when you do exercises over there, the impact on the human body, the real threat from disease, and the heat and the extreme temperatures, a 110 heat index, moving up and down those hills, and making sure you're fit when you get over there for that type of terrain. So road marching in the hills, walking up the hills versus on a road, it was something he specifically highlighted. Making sure you're conscious on water consumption as you continue to work through the heat. The impacts of disease, and making sure you're medically ready with shots and everything, but also ready to treat, and watching each other for those type of things. And then technology-wise, this is at the tactical level. I mentioned batteries already, but what it does to suck some of the energy from the batteries, and how power regeneration, how you're thinking through that, and how you don't. You've got to moderate how often when you use the radios, to use time hacks. And then the jungle, what it does to those radios as well, in terms of the triple canopy, can affect the ability for some of our systems to see satellites or to gain connectivity. Anything, line of sight is affected just based on the hills, the multiple mountains that are there. And then being conscious of some of our technology, as good as it is, may not be applicable for that environment. So this one battalion went to using water buffalo to help get supplies up and over hills, because none of the paths were big enough for infantry squad vehicles or anything motorized. And so how we were going to get it up and over, similar to what we did in Buna in Papua New Guinea in World War II, they were doing the same thing last year in the Philippines.
That's amazing.
So picking the right lessons from history, right? And then optimizing some of our technology where we can, airdropping supplies, leveraging rotary wing where you can, creating cache locations so you can make sure you can hit it and sustain yourself in the fight, as well as the feedback. Winning the first fight is understanding what I was just talking about as we apply, the lessons we're learning from the Ukraine, from the Middle East, and what we know China is developing, and being ready to protect ourselves from constant contact or visual observation from satellites, if you will, and protecting from long-range munitions the Chinese have by just distributing ourselves. And so if we're more distributed, we've got to make sure we have a system to maintain our connection. So mesh networks, as we're setting that up with the integrated tactical network that we fielded, many FORSCOM units have done that. But how do we do that and ensure we can dominate on the battlefield as we're evolving with the character of war? And some of the TIC unit in 25th Infantry Division, the TIC 1.0 Brigade 225, as well as the brigade from the 101st, and then 3rd Brigade 10th Mountain, they're all sharing lessons rapidly and sharing lessons with the force that we're applying with every exercise, with every iteration. As then we'll get a couple more transformation and contact units here in core as we move forward with one of our striker brigades. Will become a transformation and contact unit, and optimizing our exercises in these countries that you asked about, to make sure we're applying that new technology and those new organizations there, and then the bottom-up feedback that has been so helpful for our Army to quickly evolve and refine some of this technology.
And that's kind of where I was going to go next, because you've mentioned, or you've said modernization. I cannot speak today. Modernization and technology. We talk about TIC, character of war. These are all buzzwords that I've heard across FORSCOM. Just last month talking to Sergeant Major Holland, I think he said all of those while talking to him. And technology is kind of one of those huge things that we're focusing on because we're constantly changing and we're constantly trying to adapt. And I know you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what else are you guys doing to kind of stay ahead of the curve and, adapting to those new technologies and making sure that we're ready for the battlefield?
Well, first, this transformational effort the Army's undergoing right now isn't just technology.
Right.
It's also how we organize, the different ways we can train, how we're developing our leaders. And so within First Corps right now, for instance, we're looking at, how do we organize, a division artillery? Do they need long range fires, like HIMARS? And so we're looking at experimenting with HIMARS down at the DIVARTY level in 25th Infantry Division. That extended reach for that division, not new technology, if you will, but organizing for a division to have greater operational reach with their rocket artillery. And our field artillery brigade is helping do that. How we're training is another way we're transforming. We just had our 17th Field Artillery Brigade go do a Table 18, which is a battalion level qualification table, firing all the HIMARS within the battalion to certain standards. We were at 2 to 3 times the doctrinal distance between firing units there to make sure we're getting that dispersion to protect ourselves and survive longer as we're firing not from single locations, but from many, many multiple locations and achieving the mass we need to on the target in accordance with the firing table. We just did that in last weekend. Great exercise. And then how we were passing our data between our digital firing solutions on what communications between MUOS, HF, making sure we could do that because we know if you look at what's happening in northeastern Syria and certainly in the Ukraine with electromagnetic efforts there and the EW electronic warfare that's occurring there that's really degrading many types of our transport for communications or for Ukrainian communications and for ours as we're in northeastern Syria with our efforts there, being deliberate about working through how we need to be agile enough to move from one communications transport to another to pass the vital information or data to do what we need to do on the battlefields.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned, current technology that we already have being dispersed to units that we can expound upon that. Because sometimes I think we get so caught up in what's new and what's shiny and sparkly and how we're going to use that and integrate it. So I think it's fantastic that you're looking at ways of using what we already have to basically enhance the units that we have and enhancing their ability to use what we already have. So I think that's really interesting and really, really cool to understand. So, I mean, the HIMARS, I remember anytime they shot HIMARS at JBLM, you could hear it for miles everywhere. So I can only imagine if you guys are shooting them even further now. What that sounds like around there. So I know, I think that's great. And you kind of mentioned this, with the water buffalo and trying to move vehicles and stuff like that. And you find that logistics can make or break an operation. Like, how are we going to get that up and over if you can't drive an ISV or a Striker or something up the side of a mountain? And you guys are so vast. Like, I'm not going to ask if we're sending Strikers to Australia or Hawaii for missions and things like that. But because we are crossing over oceans and over large spanses between Australia, Hawaii, Alaska, Korea, Japan, all of this, how does that work with logistics? How do you maintain First Corps being sustained and ready to, respond and be effective in all of those places across the Indo-Pacific?
Well, first of all, it would be incredibly hard to do it across all those places.
Right, exactly.
We're very deliberate about it. how we're doing it. The lines of communication across the Pacific and the reality of contested logistics is something we talk about often. And right now, along with the 25th Infantry Division, we have elements from the Expeditionary Sustainment Command in the Philippines, where they're downloading part of Army pre-position stock there to help make sure we rehearse the capability for downloading these Army pre-position stocks that are out there, and can gain more readiness. We're training or practicing with it, if you will, as a rehearsal for if we have to do it. And so we did it in summer 2022 when I was at U.S. Army Pacific, and we just did it here recently with some of the different things in the Army pre-position stock. So that's an incredibly valuable system the Army has to make sure we can get sustainment stocks to different places in crisis, and we certainly want to make sure we continue to train with that and rehearse with that moving forward. We're also looking closely and working closely with all of our Army partners in Korea, in Japan, and the 8th Theater Sustainment Command there in Hawaii, as we look at how to leverage our very close relationship with Australia. I mentioned the ability to do some type of depot level work there as we build what we call joint interior lines with our partner countries. We're able to set conditions for pre-positioning certain things. The other thing we're looking at doing, and I mentioned we're building every exercise, we're doing phase maintenance forward now on aircraft in the Philippines. We just completed first iteration of that here last week. The 25th Infantry CAB did, their Combat Aviation Brigade did. Mm-hmm. Those are important aspects in terms of fixing as much forward as we can, so we aren't relying on these long lines of enormous lines of communication throughout the Pacific. So wherever possible, being able to fix forward, fix ourselves, and if we can't pre-position, leveraging our host nation partners. So as we do these exercises, what type of sustainment can we collaborate with them on, and can we make sure we're optimizing for our team as we also help their team with different things we can do.
That's fascinating, and everything you're saying, you guys should be like the poster child for the 4 wins of FORSCOM, because you guys are doing everything and you work with everybody, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. So I have really enjoyed getting to know more about what First Corps is doing, but I kind of have a personal question. Little Birdie told me that you have an article coming out next month in the May issue of the AUSA Army magazine, and it's named Aligning Land Power Against Threats in the Indo-Pacific. That sounds fascinating to me. So I can't wait for it to release. And once it does, we'll add it to the show notes of this podcast. But can you tell me just a little bit about it and what kind of inspired you to write specifically about the land power for Indo-Pacific?
Well, one thing, having been out in the Pacific here for the last 4 years minus the year in OIR, but people often assume the Pacific, there's so much water, it's all Navy and all Air Force. The reality is people live on the land, wars are fought on land, and all of our partners are watching what happened in Ukraine and conscious on the threat China is to them and their aggressive activity recently across the theater. And so we need to align land power against those threats. And we've done that recently as you look at our operations in the Aleutian Islands. The 11th Airborne and a HIMARS from 17th Field Artillery Brigade did a crisis response to the Aleutian Islands to demonstrate our capability to deter aggressive actions from Russia, for example, right? And so that was just last year. That's how I start the article. And then I talk about what we're doing in the Philippines aligned with our partners. And as we're driving our efforts with our partners are not only working with us, but they're working with their neighbors, north and south. And so bilateral exercises of the 40 some odd exercises we do now, many are becoming multilateral exercises as the Philippines works with Japan and the U.S. and Australia. If we look at Talisman Sabre and how large that exercise has got that Australia hosts and how many different partner nations are going to that, that's powerful as people realize like-minded nations as our focus on the same freedom in the Pacific that we want and that they want. And so I talk a little bit about that and talk about the importance of securing the Pacific and our position here at JBLM to project power, not only from McChord Airfield here on Joint Base Lewis McChord with 40 C-17s that the 62nd Airlift Wing has, but also the Port of Tacoma and the multiple other ports in the area that we can
Olympia,
we can
Seattle.
launch our equipment on ships, or right.
Yeah.
And then we talk about modernizing in the theater that we're going to operate in, and rehearsing and training in the theater that we're expected to operate in. So gaining some operational understanding on how we can use and optimize our equipment in the fight and become as lethal as we can be. And so it's about a 3.5-page article, quick read. It includes some of the stuff we've talked about, but good opportunity just to remind people on the importance of land power in the Pacific and what it means to the threat.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to read it because this stuff interests me. So, and plus it's JBLM and First Corps related. So, like I said, you guys hold a special place in my heart and always will. I miss it out there. So I just have one final question, and this is going to be a super, super easy one for you, or at least should be. Yeah. So, this year the Army is celebrating their 250th birthday. Happy birthday, Army. So I just kind of want to know, like, from somebody who has been in the Army for, trying to do the math, 33 years, if I remember. You joined in 1992. What does Army 250 mean to you?
It means it's an opportunity to take a second to reflect on the importance of why we exist as an Army, the opportunity that we get to serve in this Army, that if you look over the 250 years, what our Army's done to protect and defend those ideals that we find so precious to us, the freedom and liberty we have every day around America. We are so fortunate to live in this country, and we can do that because our Army has defended it for the last 250 years. And being part of something special and reflecting on those that have come before us and the big shoes we're filling is a great opportunity for our Army to celebrate that, as we also want to make sure we recognize that we are continuing to write that history every day with our transformation efforts we're doing, with our efforts to deter adversaries in China, in the Pacific, to enable another 250 years of our Army's dominance around the globe, with our actions every day, what we're doing as we work together as a team in the Army with our joint partners and with those partners and allies that are so precious to us across the Pacific.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your words. And I've actually had a blast talking to you today and learning what you guys are doing, since I've been out at JBLM for 3 years now. So I'm kind of lost in the sauce, kind of. Like I said, you guys are stuck up there in the Pacific Northwest doing your own thing. So it was really exciting and interesting to hear all the great things you guys continue to do out there. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today and talking to me and telling me all about First Corps.
Hey, Jeannie, thanks. Thanks for what you and the team there do to help educate the entire First Corps team and those interested in it, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thank you. And we'll see you guys next time on the Frontline.